Chiefs Kingdom, you may be wondering what all this weird alien like looking stuff is on your screen right now. And I can tell you, this is actually my master's thesis. So I wrote my thesis in predicting players in the NFL draft. So selecting players in the NFL draft, trying to predict their success. And in this video, I'm going to use some of my knowledge from when I wrote my thesis to try and predict four players or suggest four players who I think may have good outcomes in the NFL based on what my research for my master's thesis found. So I wrote my thesis back in 2014, and essentially what it did was it used artificial intelligence and machine learning along with data from college football player statistics as well as combine statistics. And then in their eventual NFL statistics, combined all of those and used AI and machine learning to predict whether or not that player would do one of a few things. One of them was if the player would have a successful career and play more than three quarters of the games that they would more than three quarters of the games each season they were in the league. Another thing was would they see if the player was a starter? So would they start regularly for their team? And then lastly, was the player elite? And I was fortunate enough that whenever I ran my models on players who were entering the draft, it was very successful. So the average NFL team at that point in time would have about a 10 to 12% success rate on drafting a wide receiver um, who was a quality starter. My algorithm was at about 40%. So I always pat myself on the back for that. And if you were to Google the phrase improving NFL draft accuracy with machine learning, you're more than likely to get my work as the number one um, response on Google. So all this may look like a foreign language to you. It's been several years since I've looked at this, so it kind of looks like a foreign language for me too. And you'll have to ignore my cat over here. She likes to be part of the picture sometimes, but it's been so long since I've looked at this that yeah, it kind of seems foreign to me, and I'm kind of wondering how did I do this? But I know two things from this research, and one of them is that the algorithm really valued production. So was the player productive in college? That's that was one of the most important things that the algorithm valued. Another thing that the algorithm valued was how athletic was the player, meaning did they have a good 40 time? Did they have a good shuttle drill? Did they have a good three cone? Did they have a good broad jump? Did they have a good vertical? However, I will say that production trumped athleticism. So athleticism is important, but according to the algorithm that I was using, the players who are productive were more successful, and the algorithm actually preferred production over athleticism. And so that's why I've said in the past that I think sometimes the NFL Combine is sort of like a shiny distraction for GMs in the NFL. They watch the tape, they see players perform, and they like how they look on tape. But then the combine comes around and they see, oh, well, this player can run a 40 in no time flat, and they're this athletic, they're this and that. Their tape doesn't look that great, but we can change them. We can make them a better player. And I'm not saying that GMs and NFL teams can't do that, but the combine sometimes acts as a distraction and draws teams' eyes away from players who legitimately performed on the field versus elite or great competition in college. And so the algorithm kind of um, kind of backed that up and said that yeah, production is really important. If you're productive in college, it doesn't mean you'll be productive in the NFL, but you have a better shot of being productive in the NFL if you are also productive in college. So I won't drag on about my thesis anymore. I hope that these images over here on the screen haven't given you a headache or anything. But I've got four players who I believe the algorithm would select. I wasn't able to run them through, but these are the four players that I think are interesting. And the first one is more or less a diamond in the rough type player. So this is not a player who is going to be taken early on in the draft at all. In fact, they may be in a undrafted free agent after the draft. So this could be a player like Albert Wilson, who the Chiefs picked up several years ago. Before I get too much further into Elijah Cooks, who is a wide receiver from San Jose State, I want to talk about Albert Wilson for just a second. So, if you may have remembered in one of my videos, I was wearing an Albert Wilson jersey, and some people might wonder, well, why the heck does this guy have an Albert Wilson jersey? That's really weird. I had an Albert Wilson jersey because this algorithm that I wrote many years ago, it predicted that Albert Wilson would play in 75% of his games while he was in the NFL. And at the point in time, whenever Albert Wilson was coming in out of the draft, no one knew who he was. He was from an unknown school, and what do you know? The Chiefs draft him. My algorithm was constantly saying that this Albert Wilson guy was going to be a good player, and sure enough, he ends up playing on special teams, playing roughly 75% of all of his games. Whenever he was on the team at the start of the season. And so I felt kind of vindicated. So I bought an Albert Wilson jersey, and Albert Wilson still to this day is one of my favorite Chiefs because of that. But back to Elijah Cooks. So Elijah Cooks is a plus size, tall wide receiver, 6'4", weighs 208 pounds, has a nice 40 time for a player his size, 4.5. His other measurables aren't that great in terms of explosiveness. He does have a large wingspan, but his agility is not that great. So he's weak in terms of agility, strong in terms of size, and I'd say that's fairly typical. 6'4", 210 pounds, not the most mobile. Here's what to like about him. So what to like about Elijah Cooks is, first of all, he was 21st in the NCAA in receiving yards with a little over 1,000, and he was 11th in touchdowns. So good for, or he was 11th in touchdowns, which accounted for 10 touchdowns. So he was ranked 11th, caught 10, and he's a plus size wide receiver, and he knows how to use his body. Negatives for Elijah Cooks, the first one I want to say is his age. So he spent 6 seasons in college. Um, it says he spent 6 seasons at San Jose State. That's not completely true. He played some in Nevada as well. And he's an older player. And a lot of times whenever GMs are evaluating players, there's this term called breakout age that's really important. This is why I like George Karlaftis. Breakout age is essentially the age in which that player becomes dominant in college or becomes really productive in college. And so this is why I like George Karlaftis. He was drafted very young. His breakout age is very young. And intuitively, it makes sense why GMs and people who are projecting college player performance in the NFL, why it matters to them. And think of it this way. As your body matures, you become more strong, your muscular structure becomes more defined, your overall athleticism increases. If you have a young, early breakout age, that means that prior to reaching your prime, you were already advanced and playing above your peers. So, what does that mean whenever your body is fully developed once you start getting into your mid to late 20s? And so, the thought is that if you're advanced at an early age, you'll be even more advanced at a later age. And so, if you have an early breakout age, say if you break out at the age of 18, a freshman, like Justin Ross did, who's currently on the Chiefs roster, then maybe you'll have a better chance of continuing that trajectory and being that much above your peers whenever you're 24, whenever you're 25. So that's why breakout age is important. Elijah Cooks does not have a good breakout age. But last year he was, very productive. And things to like about Elijah Cooks' tape. One is that he uses his size very well, so he can shield defenders using his body almost like a basketball player. And he's no nonsense after the catch. As soon as he catches the ball, he gets downfield. He is the anti Demarcus Robinson. So he catches the ball, gets down the field. I would be interested if the Chiefs took a flyer on Elijah Cooks as an undrafted free agent and just plug him in and see how he does. See if that production carries over to the NFL or if he looks completely lost and swallowed up by NFL talent cornerbacks. The next player I want to talk about is Xavier Hutchinson. And these last 3 players out of the 4, I pulled their information from Ryan and Dan's draft guide. There should be a link for it in the description. If you haven't got it already, you really should. It's $19, but I think it's well worth that. The amount of time and effort that Ryan Dan have put into this is insane. And I'm personally going to be using it draft night to see how these players grade out based on Ryan and Dan's metrics. Whenever the Chiefs either draft that player or another team drafts that player. So, say the Chargers draft somebody, I want to see if they got a good player or not. I can look at Dan and Ryan's guide, and they have tons of information there. They have athletic metrics, they have their film grades, just pretty much everything you could want in one spot. It's really awesome, and I can't encourage you all enough to go and purchase it because it's pretty neat, and they put in a lot of work. But the next player I want to jump into is Xavier Hutchinson. And Xavier Hutchinson doesn't have elite level athleticism. So his ranks in terms of how athletic he was are not at the top of the charts, but his production was very high. So his yards per game, he had the fourth most yards per game. And that's pretty important. I have Xavier Hutchinson here because I think he can be had in the second, third, maybe even the fourth rounds for the Chiefs. And so things to like, he was eighth in receiving yards with 1,171. He's a plus sized wide receiver, and he could be had in, like I said, the second, third, or fourth round. So he'll be there available for the Chiefs later on. However, things not to like, the mediocre athleticism. Xavier Hutchinson had good numbers in college, but was not the most athletic wide receiver, in the NCAA. And then the film. Brian and Dan did not evaluate the film very highly for Xavier Hutchinson, ranked 21 out of the receivers that they were looking at. And so that's a mid to low level film grade, and he can improve there. Xavier Hutchinson's tape, from what I saw, he uses route schemes to get open, but I don't know if that was the Big 12 or if it was actually him, manipulating space, finding the soft spot. It's hard to tell with Big 12 defenses because they're legitimately that bad. However, whenever defenders were on him and he chose to go over the middle and contested areas, he had great strength to catch, didn't mind putting his body in the line of danger, sacrificing himself. So overall, very impressed with Xavier Hutchinson over the middle. Nextly, I have Tank Dell. So Tank Dell is a unique player in that very undersized, only 5'8", 165 pounds. And their athleticism for a player of that stature going into the NFL draft, you would hope would be a little higher than this, but he's above average athletically, based on the players that Dan and Ryan evaluated for the draft, the wide receiver position. But where Tank Dell really performs and where my algorithm would really like him is because of his production. So he was number one in yards per game in the NCAA last season. He led the NCAA in both touchdowns and receiving yards. And if you can get a wide receiver that led in touchdowns and receiving yards, but is also projected to be a day 3 pick, that's an interesting situation for a team like the Chiefs, who already has a lot of pieces at the wide receiver position. The places where Tank Dell could fill would be punt returner and then as a gadget player. Because of his size, he's not going to be a 3-down wide receiver. But you can use him in spots, and Andy Reid loves having tools. And Tank Dell could be potentially another tool. And the reason he's going to be a day 3 pick from all the predictions I've seen is that it's just his size. He can't be a 3-down player, and he's at risk to have some issues with injury. Watching Tank Dell's tape, what to like about him? He's so shifty. I mean, very shifty. Good burst out of cuts, can make players miss in space, really good agility. And I would say that the grades that were given on his athletic matrix may be a little bit deceiving because of his tape. And I'm not speaking about his tape about running routes. I'm talking about his tape once he gets the ball in his hands. But it also could have been because he was playing against lesser competition. I mean, let's be honest, he was playing at Houston, and not a very good conference for college football. So the competition wasn't there. Nextly, we have Rashee Rice. And Rashee Rice is my favorite pick for the Chiefs to take in the draft at wide receiver. I know that probably there are going to be people that disagree with me here, but here's why I like him. And here's why the algorithm would like him. One, good athleticism. He doesn't have the best athleticism, and also good production, productive in college. Even though he went to SMU, he still was productive. And I believe that can carry over. His athletic matrix is the best of the four receivers that we've looked at. And things to like, aside from the athleticism and some of the production, he was third in receiving yards in the NCAA, 11th in touchdowns. He is an explosive athlete and projected in the second to third round. So these four wide receivers that I looked at, I'm kind of somewhat looking for diamonds in the rough, not those first round picks that kind of are going to be taking the first wide receiver overall. Players that will be available for the Chiefs to take if they so want to do so. I think Rashee Rice will be there at the number one pick. And then there could be potential for him to be taken in the second round. So teams may draft up. I think that a lot of the mock drafts that I'm seeing have not very many wide receivers taken in the first round. So if there's a run on wide receivers, then maybe the Chiefs will be pressured to take a player like Rashee Rice. But we'll just see how it has to pan out. But I really like what Rashee Rice brings to the table, both in terms of production and athleticism. And then things to kind of knock him. He had a lot of drops, so you need to work on catching the ball. And then his route tree is not extensive. So at SMU, he was not asked to run a full route tree. However, I think the Chiefs have the coaching staff at their disposal to coach a player like Rice up and get them acclimated to running more routes. However, that may mean that he has a slower development window and won't be ready to play day one. Looking at Rashee Rice's tape, what to like about him? He's a physical specimen. I mean, he looked like a man playing his boys at smaller schools in SMU's conference. He has good burst, very tough to tackle, very strong, and he reads his blocking lanes well. So when he catches the ball on a bubble screen, he has a good ability to find the open lanes, make cuts, read the blocks, be where he needs to be as he's trying to navigate through the backfield or navigate through the offensive line or wide receivers that are blocking in front of him. He follows his blocks well. So I'm very high on Rashee Rice. And like I said, I wasn't looking for four of the best wide receivers taking the draft. I'm looking for four players that will be available for the Chiefs, that the Chiefs won't also have to, mortgage the farm to pick up. They can still collect other players at that first pick, maybe even the second pick. And so these are the players that I was looking for. That, though, is all I've got today for today's video. I want to say thank you for sticking with me. My internet at home has been terrible lately. I don't know how good the video quality is or how good the audio quality is. I'm still trying to sort that out. I really appreciate each of one of you who have really stuck with me through this and have been patient. That means a lot to me. And lastly, I want to say, if you like what you see here, make sure you subscribe to this channel or like the video. It helps the YouTube algorithm suggest this content to other people. And we here at RGR Football are trying to get up to 30,000 subscribers. And so every subscriber we get is inching us closer there. And it's going to be awesome when we get there. I really want to say thank you for your time. And I want to throw one more question in the comments. Do you have any dark horse candidates at wide receiver or running back or any position for the Chiefs that you want to see the Chiefs take? Who are your draft crushes? Let me know. What do you think of my four players? Do you think they're worth a hoot, or do you think they're not going to pan out in the NFL? If you have any questions about my algorithm, let me know too, and I'll try to answer those in the comments too. But with that said, that's all I've got. Thank you for your time. This is Gary McKenzie once again, RGR Football, Gridiron Lines, signing out. Enjoy the rest of your day. Let's go, Brett Veach. Let's have a good draft.
Thanks for watching this video from the team at RGR Football. Click these videos to see more and subscribe to RGR Football.